Welcome to our review on fungal and protozoal diseases. The first one we're going to have a look at then is the fungal example you need to know for AQA, which is a disease called rose black spot. So as I've said, it's caused by a fungus, and hopefully the name has given you a little bit of a hint about what it actually is, because it pretty much does what it says on the tin here. It's going to occur in roses and it's going to cause black spots to develop on the leaves of them. Once those black spots have formed, then those leaves can turn yellow and drop off, and all of these things together are going to result in a reduction in photosynthesis within the plant, and as a result of that, it's going to then impede the plant's ability to grow. What we find in terms of how it's spread from one rose plant to another, then because it's a fungus, it has fungal spores, and they're able to be spread through the environment either by wind or by water. If we do have roses that are suffering from black spot, then what we can do is use a fungicide, which is basically a chemical that kills fungi, or we could strip the infected leaves from the plant and destroy them. And one of the best methods of prevention is that when you've identified any infected plants, then take the infected leaves and stems and burn them to prevent those spores spreading to others. The second disease we're going to consider in this video is malaria. Now, malaria is caused by a protist, but the protist itself isn't going to spread from one person to another on its own. It actually needs something called a vector. Now, vectors are some method, usually an organism here, that's going to be spreading it from one host organism to the next. And in the case of malaria, the vector is actually something called the Anopheles mosquito. And it's quite specific because it's only the females that will spread it. If you become infected with malaria, then what you're going to find is it's going to affect your liver and damage your red blood cells. So you'll get these recurrent episodes of fever and shaking as a result of the damage to those red blood cells. And if it's not actually dealt with properly, what we can find is that it can result in death. In terms of what we can do should you become infected, then early diagnosis is key here. So if we can diagnose someone early enough, then we can treat them with a combination of drugs. The downside is that not all countries that have malaria prevalent in them will have these drugs readily available to the general population. So that's a big problem for the people who are likely to get malaria. And the other side of it is that, as with many drugs, we're seeing increasing levels of resistance amongst the protist population. But we can do something to actually prevent malaria becoming too much of a problem, because we can take certain steps to help prevent this. When we're considering how to prevent the malaria from spreading, we're not really thinking about the protist. What we're actually looking at is how to control the vector, the mosquito. And there's a few really simple things that we can do that can dramatically reduce the spread of malaria by controlling the vector. First one is that we can use insect repellents, or we can use insecticide impregnated mosquito nets. So both of those will prevent the mosquito biting people in the first instance. Second one is we can actually spray insecticides on houses, offices and so forth in order to kill those mosquitoes. When we're thinking about where mosquitoes are going to replicate and breed, then they like standing water. So if we get rid of any of those sources of standing water, then we've taken away their breeding grounds. So less mosquitoes, less spread of malaria. And the last one is more for people who are travelling to these areas for a shorter period of time. Then people can actually take anti-malarial drugs while they're in the area to help prevent malaria from taking hold. Hopefully at the end of this video you can recall an example of a fungal disease in plants, and you can recall an example of a protist disease in humans. You can also talk about the symptoms, their treatments and how to prevent them.